Welcome to this edition of I'm Not Crazy, but I'm Dr. Rhonda Mattox, host of this show. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are having a heart to heart about what you all are talking about, or at least what those people in my circle are talking about. And it is burnout giving you the career blues? Family, as we've been navigating multiple pandemics, from the pandemics of racial inequality to the pandemic with COVID, we have been stretched far and wide, and some of us have felt like we are about to break. There are only 24 hours in a day, and the average working American spends probably about 6 to 10 hours a day at work. And if you are not enjoying your workplace, if you feel like you don't have control in your workplace, if you don't feel like you can impact and you're making a difference, it can have very strong consequences, not only in your work environment, but also in your personal and your professional relationships as well. So today I have an all-star cast of champions and industry leaders in their respective professions who are here today to talk about not just burnout, but how they used burnout to really propel them to make hard decisions and pivot in ways to where some launched nonprofits in the middle of a pandemic, some launched new companies and left their old companies, and some made it a point to prioritize structuring the workplace so that it was flexible and so that the burden of burnout would be less painful. Thank you. Do you see as you are coming in, I do want you to do what you always do. Rep your city. Yes. Hello, Talisha. Hello, Sharma. Rep your city, telling us where you're tuning in from. And now let me go ahead and introduce these amazing ladies. We have with us the Judy Ali, who is a leader in the Arkansas Medical, Dental, and Pharmaceutical Association. She is also a pharmacist, a mother of four, and she is doing her thing. She is on the management sector, really impacting and changing lives of her employees by reducing the burden of burnout right there in her workforce. We also have with us the Dr. Shalitha Jones, who is a friend of the show. She is family medicine trained and acting as a hospitalist. She's also a member of the Arkansas Medical, Dental, and Pharmaceutical Association and a leader. Hi, Pamela Burns. We are so glad you're here. Hi, Trina Banks. We also have the Dr. Ashley Booth, one of my family all-star favorites in Savannah, Georgia, who pivoted from family medicine, as you all know it, to being in direct primary care, where she is setting her hours and delivering phenomenal care. And she's a mother and a wife and an entrepreneur, or as we call it over here, docpreneur, mompreneur. Welcome. And one of my favorite psychiatrists in the whole wide world, and that is Dr. Andrea Reed of Reed and Henderson Wellness, who, like Dr. Booth, launched into the deep in the middle of the pandemic and started her own practice. Welcome to our virtual lectern. And before I get started, let me just say happy Physicians Day to you ladies. We appreciate you for joining. And we also want to thank all of our audience for joining and for staying loyal and coming on frequently. Be sure to share, because I am certain that I probably know no one right now in my circle who does not want to talk, who does not need to talk about burnout, even if they're not. So let's begin with kind of the definition of burnout. And I know that many of you have have felt like you felt it, but let me tell you what the books say. It says burnout is a long-term stress reaction marked by emotional exhaustion, sound familiar, depersonalization, and a lack of sense of personal accomplishment. The reason I chose to talk to about burnout is because in 2021 we heard about the Great Resignation, and COVID-19 wasn't the only driver, but it was certainly burning out healthcare workers. And the phenomenon known as the Great Resignation had a lot of turnover, and it impacted the healthcare industry more than any other industry, according to one report. So that's why we're talking about it. Now, I'm telling you what the medical definition is, but you all jump in and tell me what that's what it sounds like on paper, but what does it feel like in real life when you're living it out?
So for me, prior to the pandemic, because I honestly don't think it was just the pandemic that caused burnout for me. Mine occurred prior to it. And for me, burnout was irritability, it was fatigue from working an 8-hour day when I had been working in residency 12 hours plus and feeling just fine. But 8 hours at a certain workplace, I was exhausted. I didn't want to do anything after work. And I was irritable with everyone around me. And so that didn't make me a very welcoming person to be around. And I didn't like myself at that time.
Oh, that's great. That is really, really good. And you raise a valid point. Is that it was even before the pandemic. I think I saw some statistics that in 2013, 40% of physicians were burned out. In 2015, 46%. So burnout in the healthcare population was already happening. It's just the pandemic made it worse, from
Mhm.
the working later to the fear to the not knowing what was happening. It made it even more exhausting. Anyone else want to weigh in on what it actually feels like when you're living through it?
I like that definition. I don't know that I'd never ever actually heard it that way, but it basically sounds like a whole lot of words to say I'm tired, and which
Mhm.
is exactly, how you feel. And I do like the part in there that talked about the long standing, because that's kind of what it feels like. It doesn't just hit you all at once necessarily. It's something that you kind of feel building up. And that's one of those things where I say, your body kind of lets you know when it needs rest, and your body, your mind, because the physical and mental work together. But I think it's just, us just programmed to try to keep pushing, and you get to a point where you just realize that it's unhealthy to keep doing so. And so kind of that long standing tiredness, and it's, this tiredness that sleep doesn't help. So that's when you realize that no, this is something else, going on, and I have to do something about it before my body gets to the point where, it kind of forces me to address it.
Right, absolutely. And that chronic piece, it's not just like stress, but it's chronic stress that impacts your body, that impacts your mindset. And I know one of the things that I saw in the health profession was, teaching has always been considered a revered profession. Um, Law enforcement revered, healthcare revered profession. During the pandemic, it seemed like there was like this distrust that was new for us, and so I started to hear a lot of frustration, because that depersonalization, that is almost like it impacts your ability to be empathetic, your compassion, your tenderheartedness. And so, I started to hear things that I had rarely heard before. If they don't get the vaccine, then don't let them come into the hospital. I mean, those were you're but I think when you're tired, some of the irritability that Dr. Reed talked about, that hits, and it hits in a different way. And you want to talk to somebody who's irritable and cranky, talk to somebody without sleep, talk to someone who's not been rested. And we were having those long days to where we weren't resting, we were afraid. And when you're afraid, irritability happens. Yes. Dr. Ali, Dr. Booth, either of you want to weigh in before we move on?
Yes, I mean, I would say, I like Dr. Reed was saying, my fatigue or my burnout happened before I came to where I am, which was before the pandemic. When I would go home and wasn't able to disassociate from what I was doing at work, and in the morning kind of almost dreading getting back into it. So a feeling of being overwhelmed, as if what I was doing was never ending and it had no uh no many accomplishments to show that I'm making some progress in what I'm doing. So lack of resources was a big cause of that, time
Mhm.
management. And I will say one thing that has come out of the pandemic is recognizing that you can't just put another job responsibility on someone. Keep the same resources, and because it's a great idea. So that has been something I learned, that happened to me, and that I say, okay, I'm not going to do someone else like that. So for me, that's what that was. feeling like it was a continuum of one big day that never ends. There was no separation.
Absolutely. I mean, you make a great point. No separation. I remember now.
Mhm.
I am one of those rare docs who traditionally has worked part time because of the nature of the work and the fact that I'm such an empath. I take so much in, so I don't work 5 days a week like or didn't then before. But when the pandemic hit, I was working every day,
Mhm.
including Sundays, which was a revered day in my life. I was working
Mhm.
on Sundays. I was working until 10. I was supposed to be the homeschool person extraordinaire. My daughter was not getting an education and I was exhausted. I remember my brother calling me, and my brother like never calls, doesn't answer the phone, doesn't answer text. And so he sent me a text and it was just 3 words. Hey sis, how you been? And I was 4 months into the pandemic and I was on autopilot. I was putting out fires for everyone else. I was answering the phone in the evenings, talking my friends who were in healthcare off the ledge, talking my family off the ledge, and I was just on autopilot. And I had numbed out so that I could deal with it. And so when if you all had sent me that message, I would have just said fine. But it was my brother who never checks in sending that. And when I thought about it, it was like the waterfalls just began. And I realized in that moment something I hadn't realized, which was I was not okay. I was tired. I was exhausted. And so sometimes we will be that depersonalization. We will be on autopilot, numb, not checking in with ourselves, and checking in with others, but not checking in with ourselves. And I am one who believes in practicing what I preach. But in the beginning of it, I was certainly not practicing what I preach because I didn't have time to practice what I preached. I need to go to sleep at 2 a.m. when and be back up. So it was a really, really, stressful time. And I guess my question is, how did you pivot so that how did you start to cope, because we're going to some of those courageous decisions that you made to start nonprofits, foundations, do those things, but you didn't do that immediately. What did you do to cope in
Mhm.
the interim before you got there? And what would you tell the people who are listening, who are in that place that all of us were, or perhaps are even now, to cope and manage the burnout piece? And I'll start with you, Dr. Booth, and you, Dr. Reed, because I don't think you added any last time, Dr. Booth. All right, there's a little bit of delay. Dr. Reed, you want to jump in?
Yes. So, as I said before, my burnout started before the pandemic. And so I recognized that I didn't necessarily like my workplace. I didn't like how I felt. And I wanted to do a transition, but I also liked the safety of where I was at. So I started working part time at another facility and I developed joy there. Honestly, those days where,
Dr. Rhonda.
Hmm. We'll let you jump in just a second. Go ahead, Dr.
yeah.
Reed.
So, as I was saying, those days prior where I was extremely exhausted after working 8 hours, I would go to the second job, work 4 hours, and I would have like this energy boost where I felt good about what I was doing. I felt like I was making a difference and I felt appreciated. And so I then started to increase my time there because, as I said, I liked the job security at the previous facility. I liked having benefits. I liked having a steady check. And so I stayed there. I increased my time at the part time place until I built up enough where I felt comfortable jumping ship, and I actually jumped ship the January 2020, which I did not know we were about to enter a pandemic, and I did not know that my life would be changed for forever. But it was the best decision that I made because I was able to manage myself in a way that I had not been before.
Oh, I love it. You didn't make the huge leap, the all or nothing leap, but you did little by little and
Mhm.
got comfortable. You dipped your toe in the deep pool
Yeah.
and then went around to the shallow and jumped in a little bit. I like it. I like it. Dr. Booth? All right, there is a delay. Anyone else want to jump in?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay this time? It's
We
for
can.
some reason I'm lagging, but what I will say for me with burnout, it is still a delay. Oh Lord.
Dr. Booth, we're going to move on and let you circle back because we can't hear you very well. Dr. Jones or Dr. Ali?
So for me, I had to try to get back to things that I enjoyed doing because for me it did come during the pandemic, and I work as a hospitalist, so day in and out. You know, I was in the hospital setting, caring for patients who were coming in with COVID, and that's hard to watch. And one of the things that you mentioned was the compassion burnout, and that really takes a toll mentally, especially on people who, you know, like you said, are empaths. And this is what we do and why we go into this field. And when you feel yourself getting to that point, you have to take a step back and you're like, wait a minute, this is not me, you know, to not be able to feel empathy or, you know, for a person or what their choices are. And so I started doing more actually things in nature because I previously loved being outside, and of course the pandemic kind of forced us sometimes to be alone or be in smaller crowds, but for me that helped because just being able to even take a walk, you know, in nature and just enjoy the quietness, because otherwise you're, you know, in the hospital setting, and when you're not there, things on the news and, you know, just hearing people talking, there was so much noise that I had to find quiet. And
Mhm.
that's where I was able to find my quiet time. And it also helped me sometimes get into more physical health because, you know, exercise and taking those walks, or even just going to the gym and being, you know, in myself when we were able to go back, because, you know, people were slowly. And so we weren't with the big crowds and things like that. And so finding quiet really, really helped me to be able to deal with some of the things that I was feeling from that burnout.
Mhm. Those are really, really good points. And I know many times we talk a lot about what individuals can do for to to counter burnout, but a lot of what happens in your career in on your job with the burnout is that there are so many complexities in the absence of control that contribute to poor work home balance, that even if you had time to do some of those self-care activities that we tend to think of, you your job limits that. So
Mhm.
everyone says take a mental health day. Well, if you're the only person that knows how to do your job, that take a mental health day then is going to make everybody else on the job need to take a mental health day. So you have a little bit of guilt. Dr.
Mhm.
Ali, as a person who is in management, talk to us about some of the things that that your particular organization did that other companies might consider doing to reduce the burden of burnout.
Right. So I'm at a group of community health centers, which has pharmacies inside of them. So doing community health, you can't just take off, you can't close. So you have to keep going. And not only that, you have to rise above your own needs and take care of others during that time. So how do we balance that as an organization? So one of the things that we started doing 3 summers ago is changing the work week to 4.5 days. So like on Fridays, we get off half a day to kind of extend the weekend to help to allow people to do things like while their children are still in school, or where they would not have home or personal responsibilities or opportunities to do those things. That helps, and we're going to do it again this summer. So another thing that we recently did last month was increase the minimum wage to $20 an hour for all employees. And so what we were finding is that some employees were having to get another job to work, or most people were having to get like side jobs if they weren't making a certain amount of money. Well, usually those people are the base of the organization. They really help do a lot of the work. So allowing them to be able to quit those second jobs was very, very helpful.
Mhm.
Me personally, within my department, I try to, like, we just got back from San Diego. I took 3 people who normally would not go to this kind of training, this expensive training in which they're gone from work. So kind of like a double expensive. But in doing that, it renews their energy and interest in understanding and control in what they do every day. So in doing that, I guess it helps to not feel like you're just being not being told what to do. You have some sort of investment and you feel like you're getting invested in. And with that training, just in case I fall short of something or somebody else, their particular job, if somebody is out, then they get some slack. Somebody else is able to do that job. That full responsibility is not put on one person. That can be very stressful. And
Yeah.
we ascend to our goal is to try to ascend in what we do in our workplace or in our career, our business. But in doing that, you're going to have more stressors as that happens. It's not going to be a stress-free work when you start having more responsibilities. So for me, it's just learning how to cope. And that's why I said some of the things that happened for me was way before COVID. So when COVID hit, I had already found ways to cope with stress. So it wasn't so hard on me when it did happen. So
Great
and I
points.
learned how to make decisions. Um,
Great points. For those of you who are listening and who are just tuning in, we're talking about burnout, and is burnout giving you get the career blues? If you would drop in the chat some of the strategies that you use personally to alleviate some of your burnout, but also talk about some of the things that Dr. Ali talked about that your company did, if they did anything to help reduce the burden on their employees, so that we can have some ideas. But what I think I've heard with each of the people who are talking is that there was some flexibility that happened, that either you made the flexibility happen, or your companies did, or you pivoted a bit so that you could choose careers that worked for you and not against you. I love the idea of increasing the minimum wage. I really had not thought about the fact that if you increase the minimum wage, that may mean that you don't have to work that second job. And going back to the work flexibility, I think that allows mothers to stay in the workforce, because we had that great exodus, that great resignation. And a lot of that was because if schools shut down, then, and you have children and you are a single parent, then you are not going to be leaving them at home. And so do drop in into the chat what you did personally to help with that. Now, I know that some of you made some pivots. Dr. Jones, as a hospitalist, with all of that responsibility, you talked before the show started about 7 days on and I think maybe 7 days off. What other types of things happened as a hospitalist that let you alleviate some of that burnout? And how can that apply to our audience so that they can maybe kind of feel like they can take control of the reins?
Okay. So for me, I work as a hospitalist, 7 on, 7 off. And so the enjoyment of the 7 days off, it does afford me time to find rest ideally. Of course, my mind is always going and I can think of all these things that I need to be doing other than resting. But it did give me time to kind of tap into some things that I wanted to do. I really love community involvement and community health. So just before the pandemic, I actually started a nonprofit organization, Changing Health Awareness Together. And it's basically just to increase patients' knowledge of their health problems, and so they can advocate for themselves in healthcare. But then, of course, we noticed during the pandemic, people were more shut in. They weren't able to get out and do more stuff. People were becoming depressed from being, most of them having to be away from extended families, or just not kind of getting that interaction that they were used to. People were talking about their weight gain and just things that they were not happy with. So within my organization, I decided to do a challenge. So we started a Chat Healthy You 90-day challenge that, of course, was virtual based. And every week we would have a physical challenge, a mental health challenge, a nutrition challenge, and then monthly we would have financial challenges. And so I would bring in different people to speak, and then people, they were able to post their exercises or post their meals for the week and just be able to interact with other people. And they were able to get encouragement, and just have other people that they were able to reach out to. And Dr. Ali, one of the things I did want to point out was something that you said about what companies did. I personally didn't experience it, but I know a lot of the people that I work with in different, departments of the hospital, not even just during the pandemic. I think the pandemic, of course, multiplied it, was feeling unappreciated. And I
Yes.
feel like when your employees feel unappreciated, that, just compounds their burnout even more. So just even little things. And, people are always like, oh, well, people are just about finances. Well, you have to be able to support yourself and your family. So that is a huge deal. But not even just that, taking them to the conference with you, a trip that they may not have been able to make on their own. That just shows that you are appreciated. We're not just, always going to throw these new responsibilities onto your job title. We also want you to know that you are valued and you are appreciated. And I feel like that helps a tremendous deal in people who are dealing with burnout, just knowing that they are appreciated, that the people that they work for, as in employees, but also the community, knowing that you are appreciated, that helps us.
Absolutely. And I will say, as you all were talking, I thought connectivity, because while you were going on vacation and you were, or I don't, well, I see work as vacation. I see that as
Yes.
vacation. If I leave my office and I'm gone, you best believe I'm going to have a mini vacation within that trip. But the opportunity to connect and realize that you're not alone. For me, one thing that was surprising, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a diehard Toastmasters fan. When my club went virtual, I didn't like that. But those midweek doses of inspiration or just what the doctor ordered, it made it feel a little bit normal, to connect and that kind of stuff. And so with Dr. Jones, that virtual getting together to exercise, to listen with finance, about finances, all of that made you feel a little bit more connected, because so much of what we were hearing was distance, distance, distance. And while they were talking about physical distance, for many of that resulted in emotional distance. And we know that it is not good for man, woman, animal, child to be alone. We need each other. And so how did you all connect during the pandemic? And did that help with the feeling, with reducing that feeling of burnout? I think one of the things that I read was that when people feel heard by their companies, feel heard, validated, affirmed, that is a strategy, particularly if they then act on what they've heard from you, right? But that whole connectivity, how did that play in there? And Dr. Reed, remind me to talk, and Dr. Jones, remind me to talk about these vacations that these ladies took in the middle of the pandemic, while I was like, I was living vicariously through them. Now, so remind me to talk about that, because that's on my notes, and I want to make sure
Well,
we
I
talk about
traveled the most during the pandemic. It was
it.
awesome.
I don't think so. I think Dr. Reed might have you beat. But go ahead.
So for connectivity for me during the pandemic, it was in multiple ways actually. So I live alone. I was single at the time. I don't have any children. And so it was quite lonely being at home. And at that time, I had transitioned to all telemedicine. So it wasn't as if I was collaborating with many people like I would in the office. So one of the things that I did was I bought a Peloton. So at that time, I had the Peloton treadmill. And I loved it because it was a great community to work out together. A lot of my friends had bought Pelotons as well. So we would work out together pretty much every day. The other thing that we did was one of my good friends, she had a large yard. And so 6 of us, we would go every Thursday evening and we would have dinner. We'd be spaced out. But it was just great to see them, to see other people, hear other people's voices, and just enjoy being in community. I think that that was the most joyful day for me, was every Thursday. I looked forward to it. And that was how I maintained.
I like it. I like it. Let me just check in with the audience. We have Trina Banks, who is saying she switched to a work from home position, which
Mhm.
helps her tremendously. She has more flexibility of work time versus personal time because prior it was hard and during the pandemic. Her job was paused. She had to volunteer to keep things going at work and was very stressful. So that flexibility again comes into play. I think Talisa Kyler says she transitioned from CNA to just self preserve. Sometimes you have to actually change jobs as well. And so, yes, and those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking about, is burnout giving you the blues, the career blues? So, what we're talking about now is strategies that we have used to connect with people during the pandemic so that we're not alone. And then we're going to pivot to some of the other things. Anybody else want to add?
What my family did personally, that was kind of more so me, and still a little bit job based, but my family during the pandemic, we are very close knit. Like my whole life, my mom and there's like 8 of them kind of growing up, and every holiday since I was born, every holiday you can think of, we always get together. So during the pandemic, of course, that was like a huge deal that we weren't able to have that physical connection. So we started doing twice weekly Zoom. So everybody would get on Zoom twice a week. And we also did our holidays there. So, everybody would, cook their meals or whatever, but then we would get on Zoom. We would all eat together. For Christmas, everybody would be sure we mailed out everybody's gift. And so then on Christmas, we would all get on Zoom and we would all, have dinner, open our gifts together, things like that. And what I like most about it is that we have continued doing that, even though now, of course, we're able to get together in person. And we've traveled, we've done all of that, but we still have our scheduled twice weekly Zooms where we still check in. And so, we were already close knit family, but even in the separation that COVID caused, I feel that it brought us even closer together as a family.
I love it. One of the perks of the pandemic, there were some perks of the pandemic. We hear a lot about the deaths and the toll and all of that. I will say before the pandemic, one way, at least a couple of times a month, I had to drive one way 2 hours, just one way 2 hours. So it was a 4 hour travel time for me in one day. And I am perhaps the most thankful person for Zoom in the whole wide world because it cut my travel time. And that was just one of my contracts. Some of the others, I was driving an hour and a half. So for me, I loved that I can now actually just be about the work of mental health rather than the travel and that kind of thing. And it opened up people to be more receptive to the virtual world. I
Mhm.
noticed when I had a death of a close family, traditionally just the people who could afford it would be able to come, but they introduced kind of the hybrid approach so that people across the nation could participate, those kinds of things. And so it was the pandemic. I also launched a career. I launched a new private practice. I never ever under any circumstances would have and didn't want to, but because there was such a great mental health need, I would refer people to Dr. Reed. They say it's 3 or 4 months before I could get in, and then I did not have the heart to make someone who had just lost someone wait. And so I literally, without a website, without a business phone number, without any of that, launched a business and then built it on the way, on the way up. And let me tell you, that was refreshing, because then all of a sudden I had a lot more control over when I saw patients. If I wanted to see patients in Savannah, Georgia while I was there, I could do that. And so it definitely offered more flexibility. What kind of things that you all put in place to in your career, in your work lives, so that you had more flexibility and more freedom? And since Dr. Booth, I'm gonna start with you because you've been having trouble. So unmute so that you can weigh in. What kinds of things that you put in place? What transitions did you make in order to offer more flexibility?
Hello, can you guys hear me okay? And is there a
We can.
delay? Is there a lot of a delay this time?
We can hear you
Okay.
perfectly.
Woohoo! Awesome. Well, the thing that I did to make the pivot, because I actually started to experience burnout in residency of all places. When I first started, they give you that you pay like one patient an hour. And I was like, okay, I love this. And then towards the end of residency, they're like, no, we need you to see like 10 and a half day. I was like, oh no, I don't really like this. And then once I started to interview for other positions, they said, oh, we need to see you to see at least 10 or more in a half day. And I was like, that's like, it takes me 5 minutes to say hello, to really like try to figure out what's going on. So for me, I worked for a company for a few years. And then after that, it just kept gnawing at me. Like, this is not really how you want to serve others. And I said, the best way for me to do that is to try to take the control. So I kind of jumped out there, didn't have the website, didn't have all the things in place, but I was like, you got to do something, because this is not going to work for you. And if you are not serving people well, then that's not good either. And I decided to start what we call direct primary care. So I directly serve my patients, and we are able to spend more time with each other. They have greater access. Like, for instance, this morning before we got on, had a patient to text me this morning. He said, hey, I don't feel so well. I was like, well, are you able to come in, or do you want to do a telemedicine? He said, I can be there in a few minutes. I said, okay. I got him diagnosed, out the door in less than 30 minutes. And I know that he's going to feel well. And then if it doesn't work, then he's able to contact me again and say, hey, what else can we try? What else is going on? But I love being able to have that connection with my patients, because that makes me feel better. Honestly, like, them feeling better makes me feel better. And so being able to know that puts a lot of that at ease for me.
Wonderful. Now, I want you to make sure that you heard what she said. She didn't have a website, probably didn't have a business phone either, but out of necessity, and she launched. For those of you who are listening, who are much like me, and perhaps some of these ladies who will overthink and have paralysis by analysis, and try to get your brand colors and your photos and your this and your that before you launch, throw all of that out of the window. During the pandemic, people need the value that you are adding. Do not have paralysis by analysis. Add value, build along the way, take action, and stop taking all these notes all the time. Do something, do something, do something. I mean, notes are good, but I'm telling you, listen to me and listen good. I have an iPhone right now. iPhone did not wait until they were iPhone 14 quality to launch. They launched, they charged us, we told them what was wrong. Then they renovated it. We paid another $400 or $500. We said, hey, this isn't working. Then we told them what was wrong. They all the while they charging us $400 or $500. Launch, 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 launch. Stop doing all of that. Launch. The world needs the wisdom that you have. Launch, launch, launch. All right. Anyone else want to add to what she said?
Yeah. So I should mention that I actually have done 2 pivots. So prior to the pandemic, I left one facility and went into what they call a semi-private practice. And so that was in January 2020. And I enjoyed it, but the goal was always to open up my own private practice. I knew that that would occur. Me and my business partner, we went to residency together, and we had these 4-year goals. And opening up our own private practice was like year 8. And it occurred at year, I don't know, 4. It was accelerated. And so we worked together at the same semi-private practice and enjoyed it. Saw a lot of patients, had quite a bit of autonomy, but we still wanted our own. And so in September of 2021, that is when we launched Reed and Henderson Wellness. And it has been a joy and a ride since that time. Like Dr. Mattox and Dr. Booth said, they didn't have the website. I mean, we had a website, but it was like coming soon. It was under construction. That was really it. We had a phone. We had an office here in Central Arkansas, but Dr. Henderson did not have one yet in up in Northwest. So she was seeing folks telehealth. And I mean, we have grown. She has now moved into a new building and a new office. We are completely booked at this time. We're on a wait list. And it doesn't take much to start. It just takes courage. That's it. I wouldn't say that it takes confidence. It just takes courage to jump, and you can do it. And now, I mean, I don't work Fridays, which I love. I go on probably too many trips, but I still enjoy them all. And I have the ability to go and do, and I love it. And I love seeing my patients, and I have the time to do that.
And I live vicariously through her. She's been posting those pictures of her in Dubai, I think Morocco, all these places or whatever. So she is like the Beyonce that is such a sweet girl, but you're like, I want to be her when I grow up. I love it. And I want to reiterate one more time what many of the people have said. They didn't quit their job and then just build from scratch. Many of them, many of us, launched, put our toe into the water, and then and gradually went there, and then so in this virtual age, whoever you are that is listening, we are not telling you to quit your jobs, but we're saying if CNA is not your passion and your passion is really artwork, darling, we got all kinds of virtual stuff. Start your thing on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, whatever it is, and just do. If selling pies is your thing, honey, I'll buy a sweet potato pie from you. Well, I'm lying. I don't eat everybody's cooking, but I might. but launch. Anyone else want to add anything before I pivot? All right, let's talk about why vacationing was so important to you to keep you from burnout, and how did that factor in and sometimes your decisions to move on. I was on vacation when it was downloaded into me that it was time for me to leave the academic scene. I loved the work I was doing. I absolutely, I saw 4 patients a day, unlike these ladies. So I love what I was doing. I had great relationships with my coworkers, as I generally do. And I didn't necessarily want to leave. I was like, Lord, is this you or is this me? Did I eat some burnt collard greens or something? I mean, what's going on here, right? But on vacation, it seems to me on every vacation is when I'm still and I have time to connect with my spirit, to connect with the Lord. And that's when my career moves frequently are birthed in my mind, even before I act on them. How important have your vacations or your away time been in you pivoting and making these life-changing decisions that add value to others? I'm gonna start with you, Dr. Ali, because I don't know if I've heard from you and Dr. Booth nearly enough.
Well, I do love to travel. I have not been to Africa, but I was saying during the pandemic is when they started allowing people to travel to certain countries. When I started traveling the most because it was empty, got the best service. They were way cleaner than us with the COVID, probably much more extreme. I didn't feel dirty till I got back to America. But even within the country, I did a lot of traveling. And, but I would say during that time, and I did go through a divorce. And I was doing this traveling by myself. That alone was so empowering the first time I did it. Um, it's just symbolic to a lot of things, which was dealing with courage, confidence, and self gratification, things that came from myself to make myself happy. So that in itself kind of set the tone for not just that trip, but for a lot of parts of my life, including work. So what I've been is I didn't make any pivotal changes with
Oh,
my
yes, you did.
career.
Their divorce is pivotal.
Yeah, like with my, oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. With my career, like as far as changing it, but what happened was within it, I started seeing not the value of what I was doing. I changed my purpose. I changed how I did it. I changed my attitude too. Uh, you know, even
Mhm.
feeling self-entitled, and I think there's a difference with being confident and knowing your value, and also being self-entitled. Um, that was kind of making me a little bitter. um, um, so I was able to humble myself with that. I would say that it gave me being still. I think that's how you said it, Dr. Maddox. Being still with no distraction, not even a choice to be distracted, allowed me to come back with a refreshed mind, first of all, more energy, and I guess clear communication on this is what we can do moving forward. Sometimes,
Mhm.
even in presenting things, if it's too scrambled, it's not taken seriously. And so
Mhm.
I was able to present things different. My CEO would say, "You're different. You seem calmer, right?" Because I'm extremely passionate when I'm talking. I'm doing this stuff, and even that can become almost seeming confrontational. So I
Ah,
learned how to still myself, be clear in what I wanted, and just all of that. So that's how it helped me come through a lot.
I love it, and I want you all to notice because that we have a wide range. We have single, never married. We have married with kids. We have married with one kid. We have divorced. Whenever I'm having these conversations about helping people to move past their excuses, many times they will tell me, I'm divorced. I can't do this, or I'm single. I can't do this, or everyone is depending on me. There is nothing like being a very high income generating person and then deciding that you're going to leave a job. And while you may say, well, that's not $7 an hour, it making a change is concerning, anxiety provoking, frightening for anybody,
Mhm.
period. And it's certainly when you are single and you're the only income coming in, or when you are divorced with kids and other people are depending on you. So I love how we have the wide range of people who are decision makers in their job, making the decisions for how other people are, and then people who are launching and doing things differently. Now, looking back, what would you do differently now? What would you do differently now to so that you could get out of that burnout quicker and not just stay there so long?
Mm.
I don't
I
know if I
see.
would do anything different.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because if I would have done something different, I wouldn't have the joy that I have now. I wouldn't
Mm,
have the understanding of what peace feels like, what it feels like to be in control and have healthy control feels like.
mhm,
Um, and so I'm thankful for the struggle and the tragedy that occurred
mhm.
because of what the other side looks like.
Oh, I like it. I think for me, I would connect with others emotionally quicker because I took that social distance and it was emotional distance.
Mhm.
And though I was talking to people, it was fear based and it wasn't my creator has me in his hands based. And so I think I would connect in a non fear based type of way more quickly. and I would use technology more quickly to connect because it took me a while to get there. I did it readily with work, but it took me a while to get there on the family side, like Dr. Jones did quickly. Anybody else want to weigh in on what they would have done differently?
I think for me, it would have been not wait. I'm one of the people you all were talking about who I have an entire notebook with outlines of shows and topics, and it's all in that notebook, you know. But I like what Dr. Reed said about you just have to have the courage to do it, not necessarily the confidence yet, you know, that part will come, but the courage to go ahead and actually start and do things because you have all of these ideas, but for whatever reason, sometimes we hold back. So for me, that's something that I'm still battling with, just going ahead and putting things out there, work out the kinks later, but just go ahead and do it. And one of the things I like people, they say it a lot, they're like, do it scared. Like, just go ahead and do it because the confidence in everything will come as you do it and get out there and do it more. So that's definitely something that I wish I had worked on sooner, but am actively still working on.
Do it scared, do it scared, do it scared. Now, audience, you jump in the chat and tell us what you wish you had done quicker or sooner as well. Anyone else want to weigh in on what they wish they had done sooner so that they could overcome, conquer, tackle burnout?
For me, I feel like I should have put more emphasis on what brought me joy in my day-to-day life, not necessarily career-wise, but personally. I did feel selfish anytime I did anything that was related to me, that made me happy, that didn't include anybody else. So, but what I have found that in my being happy, it allows people to be that are close around me to be happy. My children are happier because I'm much more patient. I'm much more kinder, tolerant. My coworkers are happier because this for the same reason. And then I'm sincere about when I listen to them or talk to them. And so, and I have now a boyfriend that I actually like, and I think he likes me most days. So the reason why he doesn't have to be the person that entertains me, and my children don't have to be the person that entertains me and brings me joy. I find joy in the things that I do every day, and everything else is extra.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I know during the pandemic, I got a coach. I reconnected with a psychiatrist for mental health. I wish I had done that much earlier in the process. It has been so liberating for me. And so I'm going to say what I probably say on every single show. Darling, get yourself a licensed mental health professional. Notice I said licensed because everybody, all the street lay mental health people, uh, no disrespect, may not be able to deal with what you have going on. Now, as we are wrapping up, give our audience 2 tips that they can take to be more courageous and do it scared and do it anyway and conquer their paralysis by analysis so that they can lead healthier lives in their careers and professional and personally. Just two, 1, 2.
My first one is to go on vacation because that's what I do best. But I say that I think it was because of what Dr. Ali said. When you go somewhere, you see a different perspective. You can appreciate the things that you have. You can appreciate what others have. You can recenter yourself. And that is when the ideas start to flow for yourself. That I think that's when I developed a lot of courage to make a lot of the changes that I have made. It was because I went away and I was able to focus on something else. And so go on vacation, whether that is down the street to Hot Springs or across the world to Africa, all of them will be helpful in any kind of way. So that's my only tip: go on vacation.
I love it. I love it. I receive it. I receive it. I receive it. Next, anyone else want to add?
Well, I would say similar to kind of what you were saying, Dr. Mattox, is, and this is what I say anytime I make a change at work is, okay, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be some things that we're going to have to change, but let's just start here and then let's go from there. Expect, if you're going to make a change, expect things to not go how you completely planned it to go, and learn from those experiences, adjust, and keep it moving, and pat yourself on the back, even for the things that don't go well. So, and don't be so hard on yourself if it doesn't go well.
All right. I love it. I love it. Now, audience, I want you to drop your comments about what to do as well. What we can do. We want to hear from you as well. What we can do as well. I think Dr. Jones, you're up.
All right. I would say reflect, because I feel like that's something that I had to do, and that has helped me. I found myself being envious of patients that I would have who were maybe kind of towards the end of their life, and the patients that would tell me, I've lived a good life. I done things that I wanted to do. I don't feel any regrets of things that I did not get to do. And so when I started reflecting, if I felt like I could not say the same thing were it to be that point, then I knew it was time to make some changes. So I feel like if you reflect and there's something that you feel that you wanted to do that you could not do, or that you did not do, go ahead and make the changes to start doing those things. Even it could be simple things, it could be grand things, anything that you feel like if it was your time to leave here that you would have left undone, go ahead and make the preparation to start doing those things now instead of waiting.
I love it. I think for me, the most important thing that I executed was my no game. My no game went to another level. I am a former people pleaser who said yes to everything. And during the pandemic, my priorities were crystal clear. I was not going to put certain people at risk to do things. I still am much more conservative than probably all of you in terms of my exit game, but saying no and realizing that that didn't make me a meanie. But in order, if I said no to you, then I was saying yes to something that was important to me. Because if I said yes, and then I would resent you as and perhaps grow bitter as Dr. Ali, because I'm thinking you should know I don't have time for this. Or perhaps they should know, but they will know if you tell them, and not feel guilty about it. And I still struggle with the not feeling guilty about it sometimes, but I am more crystal clear on my no's. And I am really clear on my calendar. I became like a calendar scheduling queen in terms of automation, so that things can be done seamlessly, effortlessly. My calendar is like my boyfriend, my best friend, all of that. I don't say yes to anything without that calendar. And so that automation, calendar, saying no, realizing that my time is an investment, and I can spend it, I can waste it, I can sow it, but my time, if I value my time at $600 an hour, and then you say, hey, let's go have coffee, and then you show up 20 minutes late, and I had to fight through traffic, coffee with you is not worth $600 an hour to me. And so, no, we can talk by phone. We have virtual coffee, but no, I'm not going out with you. So, realizing that people were leaving here like dropping like flies, and I cannot waste my time because you want to catch up. I mean, so because you doing everything everybody else wants you to do is the quickest way to burn out. So get a plan for your time, invest your time, decide, put a value on your time, and then decide if scrolling Facebook at 2 a.m. for 3 hours is worth $1,800 to you, if that's how much you can make if you're doing something else. Now, as I said that, that does not sound like godly or ladylike or whatever, I know. But honey, don't waste your time. Invest it, because you can be here today and gone tomorrow. Ladies, let me just take this opportunity one more time to say happy Physicians Day. Happy Black Sister Girl, Phenomenal Lady Day. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I just am going to brag on them. I've known them for quite some time and seen the evolution of these ladies, and they are adding value wherever they go. Likewise, I encourage you to step outside of that mousy place that you have been, to where you were doing what other people expect of you, and you're not walking in ordered footsteps, purpose driven life. Your time here may be here today and gone tomorrow. Make sure that you're forgiving and that you are walking according to purpose and according to the desires of your heart. Not Mom and them, not Pookie and them, not your husband and them, yours. Thank you for sharing your day with me. And I will see you all same time, same place, every Thursday from 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Hi, Lovey, Hannah, Destiny. Thank you so much for joining us. Sabrina, Trina Banks, all of you, you rock. I love that Black Girl Magic Day. Happy Black Girl Magic Day. Thank you, Miss Banks. We appreciate you. And I appreciate each of you. And thank you, Ellis, for being a phenomenal producer. And Pam, I can't thank you for listening. Thank you. You rock as well. Pam is the person who introduced me to Ellis, who got me this show. I sure appreciate you. Have a great one. Bye-bye. Step outside of your comfort zone and make an impact. Hey, let's take a picture before we go.